So anyway, they were planning a weekend event where Ali was the guest speaker, and they realized that they didn't have anyone to receive Ali, and they didn't have a security detail. So they asked me if I would provide security for Muhammad, and I said absolutely. So the Friday comes for Ali arrives. I go to the airport, we receive him, and we go straight to the masjid. So when we get to the masjid, before we get out of the limo, I said, so brother, this is the first time I ever met this man. So I was like, so brother, when we go into this mosque, there's about 1,300 Muslims in there. I said, and so after Jummah is over, let's sit towards the back so that way I can get you out of here. We can go to our next next appointment. And he just looks at me. He's never acknowledges or anything. So anyway, we go into the masjid, and the masjid is packed. So Ali starts moving people to the side, and he's making his way to the front row. He gets to the front row. He's seated, and the khatib, he's an Egyptian graduate from Al-Azhar. It even shocks him. He's like he recognizes Ali, and it throws him off his khutbah. so he continues. So Ali sits there, and I sit behind him. So we finish the salat, we do the salams, we finish the salat, and then everybody just converges on Ali.
What follows is a discussion with Rashid Abdul-Salaam. Rashid is a criminal defense investigator currently employed by the Federal Public Defender of the Northern District of Alabama, Birmingham, USA. Rashid's experience as a criminal defense investigator spans over 3 decades. This has allowed him the opportunity to work on some extremely interesting and high-profile cases. Rashid was an investigator in the NFL player Ray Lewis murder defense team. He was also an investigative consultant for the defense team of the primary defendant in the 1993 New York World Trade Center bombing case. In addition, Rashid has also served as the head of security for ISNA, and in that capacity, he had the opportunity to work with and spend some time with influential public figures within the Muslim community. I was keen to spend some time with Rashid to find out more about his experiences and the lessons he has taken from the time he spent with these individuals behind the scenes. Rashid is a thoughtful and caring individual, and I really hope you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed speaking with him. This is a Kianistan podcast. To support us, follow and subscribe, and also don't forget to check out our sponsors for today. Now, let's get started. Rashid Abdul-Salaam, brother, thank you very much for joining us. It's an honor and privilege to have you here with us today. How are you doing today?
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm doing very well. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
And, I'm honored to be
Thank you. I've been looking forward to today, our discussion today. So I'm eager to get started. There's a bunch of things I wanted to go over with you. You have a very interesting and varied background. To start with, can we talk a little bit about your current preoccupation professionally? What do you do? Where do you work? What keeps you busy?
Currently, I am a full-time staff investigator with the Federal Public Defender's Office in the Northern District of Alabama. I am an employee with the Public Defender Office is a division of the United States Court in the United States Judiciary. So I currently work for the United States Court, but I work for the division of the Federal Public Defender's Office. And our office is the legal apparatus that is available for people charged with federal crimes who are deemed by the federal court as being indigent and they cannot afford representation. So we are assigned to those cases to represent people in all criminal matters. We don't do any civil matters at all. So to that extent, I can't get into any cases or any work per se with my office, nor do I represent them in this particular conversation. It's just an explanation of what I currently do for a living. And so all of the comments that I would make going forward are my own comments, and it doesn't reflect the office in which I'm assigned to or I'm
Sure.
working with.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the explanation. So just so that I can understand a little bit better the legal framework in the USA. So federal cases, are they cases that are those criminal cases always, or is it a certain type of cases that go to federal court, or do they all escalate up to the federal level where the Supreme Court is? How does it work?
Okay, so the way it works in the United States is basically established on three separate, three equal branches of government, but they're separate but co-equal. And it's pretty much the landscape on all levels. So when you start looking at the way that the United States government is established, you have the federal government, which has jurisdiction, of course, over the entire country. Then you have state government, which is the body that governs the state statutes of each state. Then you have the county level, and then some states, they don't necessarily have counties. They have what are called parishes or boroughs, and then you have this the city, the local level, which are municipalities, cities. So you have the city, the county, the state, and then the federal government. So say, for instance, an individual has an issue, a legal issue on the city level, just a dispute with, say, a neighbor, and they want to get relief. They'll file a lawsuit, and it goes to the city court for a city municipal judge to decide that matter. If they feel that they are not getting relief, they can appeal it to the county level. And then if they don't get the relief in the county level, they can appeal it to the state level. And then subsequently they can appeal it to the federal level, in which that is the ultimate
authority
branch or level that you can go. Now, in legal cases in the United States, you have two types of legal brackets you can be in. You can either have a civil issue, or you can have a criminal issue.
Yes.
Those are the only two differences. So the office that I work with, we only deal with criminal issues. So on the federal level, you have, and all federal judges, they can hear both. They can hear civil cases, and they can also hear criminal cases to have those cases adjudicated. But there are different rules, of course, because criminal cases, basically, you have a complainant or a plaintiff that brings the case. And so the burden of proving the case is on the plaintiff. And then you have the defendant, who is the person that the complaint is against. Mm-hmm. And then they defend themselves. And the result of a civil case is just whether or not the plaintiff prevails and they get a judgment in favor to them, which in most instances involve some type of monetary compensation. Mm-hmm. Okay. Or the defendant, if that defendant wins, then of course they are adjudicated from the case that was brought against them. And then the plaintiff, they're responsible for paying the expenses for that person to having to defend themselves.
Okay.
So in the criminal side, you have a criminal violation of law, whether of city law, county law, state, or federal. So a person violates the law, they get charged by that local or federal entity that brings the charge. The officers or detectives or FBI or whatever level that this offense occurred, then it goes to the prosecutors, and then the prosecutors make a determination whether or not to actually bring the formal charges and indict this person, so they can start the criminal judicial action against that person. Then that person has to appear in court, and the charges are read to them, and then they plead either guilty or not guilty, and then the process starts. And in most instances in a civil case, then it comes up the issue of a bond, whether they're going to be detained until that case actually goes into court, or if they will be given a bond. And sometimes it's a property bond, a cash bond, or sometimes people are released on their own recognizance. So it's that's kind of how that system sets up.
And so at the point where a typical case comes to you, at that point, is it like state funded typically, or is it sometimes state funded, sometimes the party are funding it themselves?
Okay, so when you say funded, okay, when you're dealing with a criminal case, the only issue of funding comes about as it pertains to the defendant, in a criminal case. If a person is charged with an offense, then it is the government that's bringing that charge against them. It could be the state, it could be the county, or it could be the federal government that's bringing that case against them, and in a criminal case. And then that defendant is responsible for defending themselves against these charges. Now, in the United States, if a person has no money, if they are deemed by the court as being indigent, then they are entitled to representation, under the Constitution. And so then at that point, the judge will appoint a counsel for the defendant. And so when counsel is appointed to them, then the government actually pays for the representation for that individual. That individual doesn't have to incur any cost.
I see.
And so, then that person is responsible for, then the legal team is responsible for defending that person. And it's not just, they just get a lawyer. Under the Constitution, they are entitled to competent, zealous defense.
Okay.
So at the point where they get an attorney and the attorney is just going through the motions and they're not really applying themselves, that defendant has a right to go before the judge and saying, like, look, this person doesn't have my best interest and they're not doing anything on my behalf. And then at that point, they can file a motion to have new counsel assigned to them, because the Constitution, it doesn't just guarantee them the right to counsel, but it has to be competent and zealous.
And does that happen in practice, in your experience, that people do midway decide? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely. All the time. I mean, there are situations where people actually go all the way through trial. And then at the conclusion, if they're guilty, if they're found guilty, for instance, and then a penalty is imposed upon them, and they don't like the result because they feel that their attorney didn't listen to them, didn't represent them, then they can file a motion of relief. And basically what they do is they attack the attorney, the defense team, saying that they had counsel, but they had ineffective assistance of counsel. And so that's one of the first stages of filing an appeal. It's saying that, yes, I had an attorney and I had a legal team, but they were incompetent.
Because what I'm thinking is that, so the type of cases that come to you, your clients are pretty desperate people, and at times they can't even maybe afford proper defense, so they're having to rely on.
The only people that we represent in the public defender system, we only represent indigent people.
Wow.
Now, it's kind of complicated, because there are affluent people that we represent, but the government may be charging them with fraud or theft, or so they got their property by illegal means, like they're a drug dealer or whatever, and so they may be very wealthy.
They can't access their funds.
The government connects with the case that you got these funds illegal, so we're going to seize them. And at the point that they seize their funds, now they become indigent.
I see.
But they're very influential people and they're very prestigious. And these are the most difficult people to deal with in many instances, because they feel so entitled.
So how is it there must be a huge burden of responsibility on your shoulder. How do you actually cope with that on a daily basis? And also, how easy is it to gain the trust of your clients as well? Because they may be in a situation where they don't trust the whole system.
Well, when you're dealing with criminal cases, just in general, no one wants to be charged with a crime on any level, because now this is a very serious matter because you're dealing with two things that can be taken from you. First and foremost, your freedom, and then secondly, your property. And so these are the things that are at risk when you go into the judicial system with charges, whether they're civil or whether they're criminal. If it's a civil case brought against you, then the person bringing that civil case against you, they're trying to get monetary relief. So they're coming for your assets. And so and then if it's the criminal part of it, of course they're coming for your liberty. And so the matter, if it goes to court, is serious. And if a person does not take it serious, then it's most likely that they're going to be found liable, or they're going to be found guilty, liable in a civil case, and they're going to be found guilty in a criminal case. And those results are always bad results. So yes, it is very serious. It's when you get served with a summons to appear in court or a subpoena to appear in court, it's not a casual thing, because the document itself says you are hereby ordered to appear. Yeah. It doesn't say, "Oh, we're requesting your appearance." No, it's an order, and then if you violate that order, you're held in contempt of court. At which time, then now see, even in a civil matter, if you get served with a summons to appear in court on a civil matter, and if you refuse to appear, one or two things are going to happen, or both. Number one, they can make the judgment against you without you even being there. Yeah. Particularly in a civil case. A lot of people that file civil motions, they want that. If you don't show up, then the judgment is going to be ordered against you. And then you're also subject to being in contempt of court because you were summoned to that particular court. And in most instances, in civil instances, they don't follow up on that because the plaintiff is satisfied because they got the judgment and now they're in your pocket. And so the court doesn't care. And there's so many of those cases, they don't follow up on it in many instances civilly. Criminally, if you don't show up, then they will issue a warrant and law enforcement will be actively looking for you. Yeah. And then you go into a database nationally where there is a BOLO, be on the lookout for you, or a warrant that's in all the systems, and you get stopped for just a minor traffic violation. They run your name, and boom, that warrant pops up, and at that point, they take you into custody.
Before we go any further, let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a leading e-commerce management agency helping businesses succeed online. So whether it's looking for new products, supplier sourcing, account creation, creating listings, keyword research, image editing, video creation, or managing your PPC campaigns and advertising, WLC can provide a complete A to Z package that is tailored around your specific needs. So whether you're new at the e-commerce game or an established business wanting to take your sales to the next level, get in touch. WLC is here to help and support you every step of the way. Now, for transparency, let me also explain my own relationship with WLC. I'm actually the founder and the managing director of this fantastic company. So that means that I'm actually placed in a unique position where I can offer you a brilliant deal today. So if you are interested in e-commerce and you feel that you may benefit from some help in managing your account, then get in touch and we can offer you 1 month management with 0 fees. So you'll be getting 30 days of expert work for absolutely no cost to you at all. Simply, when you speak with someone, just quote Kianistan, and I will personally make sure that you're well looked after. The number to dial is 0044 203 818 5666. Again, that's 0044 203 818 5666. You can also reach us at that number using WhatsApp, or you can reach us at www.worldwidelistings.co.uk. That's all one word, www.worldwidelistings.co.uk. Thank you, and let's get back to the podcast.
So you've been doing this for a fair amount of time, and you were mentioning to me previously how there's been some high-profile cases that you've been involved in. Can you tell me a little bit about the Ray Lewis case that you were involved in?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so I got involved in the Ray Lewis case. This was in 2000, January 2000.
Can you tell us a bit about the background of the case?
Yeah. So Ray Lewis is a famous American football player that played for the Baltimore Ravens. Mm-hmm. And he was like one of the, if you mention American football players, NFL, you can't talk about the NFL and certain positions. He played linebacker, defensive guy. You can't talk about that game without mentioning him. He's a Hall of Famer. So at the time, he was young. He was a up and rising, established superstar in the sport. And he was in Atlanta, Georgia during the Super Bowl against the Rams and the Titans, I believe it was, in Atlanta in 2000. And during that Super Bowl week, there's a lot of parties. And the Super Bowl, as you know, it's a tremendous event, and it's like a week long of festivities. But the night of the game, Ray Lewis and a party, he had a party of people, like 13 people in his party, that all arrived at a particular nightclub in Atlanta, in this very ritzy area of Atlanta, in a limo. And, these guys were all just dressed, very expensive jewelry and fur coats and all this, because it was in January. And they were at a nightclub, and there was a group of people there from Akron, Ohio. Ray Lewis himself is from Florida. He went to the University of Miami. So he has a lot of contacts and a lot of people that are from Miami. And so after the game was over and after the party was over, they were leaving this club. A confrontation ensued, and those two parties got into a confrontation. And as a result of it, two guys in the group of people that were from Akron, Ohio, were stabbed to death, and they were left on the street and literally died in the street. And Ray Lewis and his party got into his limo, and they fled the scene. And so from that, because he was Ray Lewis, all the witnesses were able to identify that's Ray Lewis. and so of course they put a warrant out for his arrest. They didn't know who the other party, the other members of Ray's party was, but Ray Lewis was identified. And so they put the warrant out for him. And of course they had the license plate number of the limousine. So when they put out the warrant, they found the limousine driver first. He subsequently told them where Ray Lewis was, and then he was arrested, and Ray Lewis was charged with 2 counts of capital murder. And so capital murder in the state of Georgia meant that they could actually seek the death penalty against him. So it's the most serious charge you can get in the United States, is to be charged with a capital offense. And that, so they were coming for him. And so that case was, and in the United States, when the case is brought against you, everything that is reported in the media is from the position of the prosecutorial position. So it's all slanted and tainted towards, oh, he must have did it, or he had something to do with it, because that's the way that they present the case. And the defense, all we can do is just sit there and just wait for all of this stuff to accumulate, the evidence, and then at some point, all the evidence is given to us, statutorily by law. But there's a pause between that, and many things are done by the time we get to discovery, and that's the biggest challenge of a defense team, is waiting to get discovery. But we can get out in front of it at the time that our client gets arrested. Then of course we immediately go and have contact with him and get all the information that we can from him or her, so we can start developing our case and identifying witnesses. And there are many things that we know at that point that the police and the government, they do not know.
Yeah.
So
were you part of the defense team from day one on that case, or were you brought in at a later stage? I think the case didn't actually last very long, did it?
No, it didn't. And the reason behind it is that I came in day one on that case. I was brought in. The initial investigator, the lead investigator, worked with the firm that was representing Ray. Now, I worked with one of the partners of that firm, but so I was brought in with them because of my expertise and some cultural things, because the lead investigator was an Italian American and an older gentleman. I'm African American. I was younger at that point. And I had a lot of clients previously that were sports celebrities and people in the entertainment and music industry. So that gave me an advantage, and it gave me leverage to move into social circles that's difficult for other investigators to do. Yeah. And so they brought me in on that case. And so we came in on that case in January, and we had Ray Lewis's case adjudicated by June.
Wow.
He was done. And we actually went all the way to trial. But what we were able to find in that case was it was obvious that they literally had no evidence tying Ray Lewis to the actual murder of those two individuals, other than the fact that he was present and there were people in his group that were responsible for the murder, but it was not, in fact, Ray Lewis. And the prosecution knew that from day one. But because they were so tainted, and it's like Ray Lewis was like, in Atlanta, it was on the equivalence to the O.J. Simpson case. So like everybody involved in that case on the prosecutorial side, the police office and everyone is they're thinking ahead. Oh, this is my book opportunity. This is my OJ. This is my OJ moment. And it tainted every action from the people involved with the prosecution and the government, even all the way up to the mayor at that time. He even came out and made a press conference with the district attorney, and the things that they said in that press conference were lies, and they knew it was lies at the time that they said it, but they were so stricken with the celebrity of it that they didn't care. And so myself as a defense investigator, my business is I'm in the information business. The government accumulates information that they feel comfortable will convict our client. My job is to take every document that was involved in that case, every person that touched that case, from the initial officers that showed up at the crime scene, and then they established a perimeter to try to preserve the crime scene, to the CSI people, crime scene investigators that show up and start taking forensic evidence, to the detectives that show up and start doing perimeters and canvases and gathering information about witnesses and such, to the forensic people of the blood, the projectiles, the shell casings, all these different things. In this case, it was a stabbing, so the murder weapons were never recovered, and so we have to wait for all of this to be processed before we get it. And then the government, the rules in criminal cases, they have kind of a long window of time until they can hold this evidence until they're compelled to give it to the defense, and it's called discovery. But in this case, there was so much involved that we didn't have to wait for the police to come up with the discovery. We were there, involved, and contacted all of the players that were involved. We knew who everyone was that was there before the police did. They knew some of the players, but we knew everyone. And so we had an advantage in this case. And the more that we dive into this case, everything that I was able to peel back from this case, we were able to prove, in fact, that Ray Lewis did not hold a knife. He did not buy a knife. We had the evidence where the knife was bought, was purchased at a sports store.
Yeah, I read about
where
that.
Ray Lewis was doing a signing about 3 days before that occurred at this Sports Authority sports place. And so, of course, he was being paid to come there to do autographs. While he was there, two of those accomplices that was in his party, they were walking around the store and they purchased the murder weapons. They bought the two knives. And so when they purchased the knives, all this is on video because
But how do we know that was a murder weapon if the murder weapon was never discovered?
We know it was the murder weapon because we know it was in the hands of the murderers. We know that. But we're not compelled to tell the government that.
They need to come up with that themselves.
We only want to absolve our client and to exonerate him, but we don't have to give information to them to implement these other two guys. Because as a matter of fact, when Ray Lewis went to trial, he went to trial with those other two guys. They were his co-defendants.
Yes, I was going to ask actually. So your client was just Ray Lewis.
Yes.
You were not representing the other two.
We cannot. You can't because there's a conflict. But the state, and what the state does to try to strengthen their case against you, they have the option of trying everyone at the same time, or they can try them separately. And in most defense cases where you have multiple co-defendants, the defense always files a motion for a severance. We want to be separated from these people because we don't want their bad acts to taint and to spill over in the jury's mind when they're looking at our client. But in this case, it really wasn't an issue because of the investigation, the facts that I was able to come up with, it clearly, I was able to come up with two points in this case, the evidence that just totally exonerated our client. First and foremost, the issue of these knives. We were able to come up with the actual receipt of the purchase of the knives. Oh, wow. And how
did you do that?
This is how we came about it. And then sometimes investigations, sometimes things just fall into your lap, just out of the heavens. It just falls into your lap.
So interesting.
And so what happened was early on in the case, like within the first couple of weeks of us working on this case, when Ray was at that Sports Authority doing the autographs and he finished, he was walking to this car and there was a guy who came up to him that went to college with him. And he was like, Ray, hey, how you doing? I was like, hey, how are you doing? I haven't seen you. I haven't caught up with you since you big time. You in the pros now. Let's catch up. And so Ray was like, oh, yeah, let me give you my number. So he didn't have any paper to write on. So the guy that purchased the knives gave him that receipt.
Wow.
He gave the receipt to Ray. Ray writes his phone number on that receipt and gives it to this guy. And so this guy's holding on to this receipt because he's got Ray Lewis's number on it, right? And so when the murder went down and they talked about two knives being involved and then, they putting some of this evidence out in the media. And then, of course, this guy, Ray's friend realizes, hey, Ray Lewis got arrested and they're accusing him of murdering someone with a knife. He looks at this piece of paper and it's the freaking receipt.
It's a knife. Oh, wow.
Of the two knives.
So he came to you?
No, he didn't come to us. He actually called the police. He calls the police first and he says, listen, my name is so-and-so and I think I may have some evidence that is essential to this case that you guys have against Ray Lewis. The police blew him off. as like a prank caller. But every call that goes into the police is recorded. So the guy calls back several more times, and they were like, listen, we'll have someone get back to you. That's it. And so,
wow.
So he's frustrated. So he calls our office and was like, listen, this is what I have. I go out and meet with the guy, interview him, and I get the receipt.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, I get the receipt. And so then what we do is we go to the store and we get the video showing that these guys purchased it. Now, mind you, the police and the government, they had the video of those guys buying those knives, right? But they just didn't have the receipt. But they did have the receipt because it's digital. They were able to recover the receipt.
Yeah.
But I had the actual receipt that was in the hands of the person who purchased it. So we didn't immediately do anything with that because we're already in the trial mode. We're going to hold this. So we put this to the side. The second thing that happened was when the confrontation broke out after the party, Ray Lewis's group and a group of guys from Akron. So what happened was there was some yelling going on from the Akron people, and they weren't even talking to Ray Lewis's people, the two guys that were with Ray Lewis. But the two guys that were with Ray Lewis, they were legitimate, really like gang guys. They were criminals. Okay. But these are the type of people that he had around him when he was in college in Miami, because Miami, there's a lot of criminal activity that goes on in Miami. You got drugs, you got guns, you got all kind of stuff going on in Miami. We have to look any further than P. Diddy Combs right now. and I worked for Puffy for 12 years, so I know Miami really well. So, but anyway, these guys were just bad guys. And Ray didn't have them in his camp when he was playing ball because Ray was in Baltimore. Those guys were in Miami. But they all came to Atlanta for the Super Bowl because it's Super Bowl week. And these are his guys, and he didn't know, that they were going to do this. So anyway, the confrontation started with two of the Akron, Ohio guys that were actually living in Atlanta at that time. The other Akron guys came from Akron, Ohio, and they had caught up with these two guys. So the two guys that got murdered, they were living in Atlanta, and that they felt like, hey, we're Atlantans now, so they got into this confrontation with these guys with Ray at the time that they reached the limo, and then a fight ensued. One of the guys that got murdered, he took a champagne bottle and hit one of the other guys in the head with a champagne bottle, and that's how everything started. And so then the fight started, and they were, all the stabbing was going on. Ray was just trying to get everyone in the limo. He was like, hey, get in the limo, cut this out, blah, blah, blah. And all these women and everything, and everybody gets in the limo. And then Ray gets into the limo. And then those two guys that were in the confrontation, they were the last two guys to get in the limo. And so when they get into the limo, they get in and they literally step over Ray, and they get blood on Ray's clothes.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah.
That there was blood on
But they still have the knives with them.
Yeah.
So they get in the limo, and then the limo takes off, and then one of the friends of the Ohio guys that were dead, he had a gun, and he shoots at the limousine, and he hits it several times as it's driving away. And then there was the other guys that were there with the friends. They left. They left those two guys dead in the street, and the other four Akron guys, they got in the car and they drove away.
Wow.
So one of the guys in the car calls his girlfriend in Ohio, and he says, listen, we were just with, Richard Lawler and this other kid. And he says, I think Richard's dead. And she's like, what? She says, yeah, I think Richard's dead. So that girl calls Richard Lawler, the guy that got killed, because they all know each other. She calls the dead person's girlfriend and says, hey, I think your boyfriend just got killed in Atlanta.
Wow.
And so anyway, my job was to track down these guys that were in that fight, which I did. One of the guys literally was holding one of the guys in his arms when he died.
Oh, no.
And he didn't want to leave when those guys drove off if they made him get in the car. My job was to track this guy down because he saw everything that went down, and he gave a report to the police. And so in the police report of that particular guy, his guy's name was Chino Nino. He's supposed to be a rapper. In the report that the police had of the statement of Chino Nino, it said that Chino said, just before Ray got into the limo, I saw him hit Richard Lawler, one of the guys. And so it's crucial that we interview this guy, because if they're saying that Ray hit this guy, then that makes him complicit in this murder. So anyway, I go to Ohio like 4 or 5 different times, and I can't find this Chino Nino guy until I was able to get a lead that he was at a halfway house. Go to the halfway house, interview him, and as I interview him, I give him a copy of this police report, and I say, can you read this report and tell me if it's accurate? He reads the report and he says, oh, this part's not right. I didn't say that. I said, what part? He said, where it said I saw Ray Lewis hit Richard. He said, I never said that. He said, I saw people grabbing each other's clothes. I didn't say Ray hit him. I was like, wow. I said, okay. And he said, and I told them that when they brought me to Atlanta and they did that little reenactment. I said, what reenactment? They flew this guy into Atlanta, and the prosecutors they rented a limousine, and they did a reenactment of the events at the crime scene.
And he told them, but
they never gave us the information about that, which is a constitutional violation.
Yeah,
they are compelled to give us everything that they did in the investigation of the case. They never told us they brought that guy in. They never told us they did a reenactment. Anyway, so the guy tells me, I told them that didn't happen when we did the reenactment. And he said, and the lady prosecutor, she gave me the report and told me to cross out what was wrong, write in what really happened, initial it, and sign it. We never got that document. So I told him, I said, I want you to do to this report what you did when you did the reenactment. And he did. He X'd out what the police said he said. He wrote in what he saw. He initialed it. He signed it.
Wow.
After I left that facility, I was in the parking lot, and I called the attorney. I called the attorney, and I told him what had just happened. He was like, are you kidding me? He said, where's that report? I said, I have it right here in my hand. He said, put that report in your briefcase.
Yes, you got it.
Go immediately to the airport and come straight to my office. He said, I don't care what time you get here. I'm staying here until you get here. So that's what happened.
Amazing.
That document, it broke the case because it totally absolved Ray Lewis. And the government knew this, and they never told us. So when we're in court, and Ray Lewis's case was entirely on court TV, live. Mm-hmm. So we're in court, and the attorney stands up and makes a standing motion to the judge to dismiss the charges against our client based on the fact that the government did a Brady violation. It was a court decision that you have to turn evidence over.
Yeah.
And they tell the judge what happened, and the judge looks at the prosecutor, Paul Howard, and he says, Mr. Howard, is this true? He was like, well, Your Honor, yes, we did this. And you felt that you didn't have to turn this over to the defense? This actually happened? He said, well, Your Honor, we didn't believe that we had to turn it over to them because their investigator found out about it. He was like, that's not how it works, Mr. Howard. Right? And he was like, this is an egregious violation of the Brady, of constitutional issues. And it says, and though I'm not going to dismiss this case, but I'm going to order you that when we bring the jury in, you're going to tell the jury what you did. Right?
Wow.
And he said, well, Your Honor, I don't believe I'm compelled to do it. He said, these are your options, Mr. Howard. You either tell the jury what you did, or I'm going to allow Mr. Garland to tell the jury what you did. And I'm sure you're going to like their version. So once they did that and they explained to the jury what happened, at that point, the jury totally disengaged, and the prosecution had no credibility against Ray. That turned the case. The next day, they called the defense team. The prosecution, asked for a meeting with us before court, and they were like, "Well, we're willing to dismiss the charges against Ray.
Wow.
If he agrees to plead guilty to lying to the police when he initially was arrested, which was a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
It's like a little fine. Yeah. But in doing that, they also wanted him to incur the legal expenses for the prosecution for all of the documents that they had to come up with in prosecuting him. And the cost of that, it came out to just under $500,000.
Oh, wow. Did you do it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, for his freedom.
Yeah, exactly.
For his freedom, yeah. And also as a condition to that, he had to do what is called an allocution on the stand. That is to basically tell in open court what he is pleading guilty to, which was the misdemeanor for lying to the police. But once he got on the stand, and to do that, now he is available for the other two attorneys or the co-defendants to cross-examine him.
I see.
And so all that is it's a record. And it's interesting that in that case that, this case was being followed by every media outlet in the country, but in particular, the Baltimore Sun, the local newspaper in Baltimore, was covering it real intimate. And of course, we gave them preferential treatment because, of course, we want to restore, our goal was to restore Ray Lewis's character in Baltimore. And so as a result of that reporter, he wrote this story the day that Ray Lewis pled guilty to the misdemeanor, and then he was out of the case. And he started the article by mentioning me coming to court with Ray every day, and so it was pretty interesting. Amazing. So I have that article.
Amazing. I think this year in January there was a documentary released about this whole case. By someone called Tim Livingston. He's a podcast host for something called The Whistleblower. I haven't seen that, but it's on my watch list now. But it's very interesting. Yeah,
because we're coming up on the 25th anniversary.
Oh yes.
Next January will be 25 years that case happened. So
I see.
It's as a matter of fact, it's so interesting with that case. I literally still have my investigative file of all the documents, everything that happened in that case. Yeah,
it's amazing. It's a piece of history there. Tell me, shall we talk a little bit about the World Trade Center bombing in 1993? Because that's another really interesting one.
Yeah, interesting. So in 1993, there was a group of Muslim guys, Pakistani, and they had developed a plot to get a panel truck, like a truck, and they loaded the truck with these chemicals. And the mastermind of the plan was an engineer, and he put a particular timer onto the chemicals that would allow the person to drive the truck into the World Trade Center and leave, and then he could activate the timer, which it exploded. And so the client that we represented, his name was Mohammed Salama, and he was
the driver.
Palestinian, and he lived in Jersey City, which is just across the George Washington Bridge from Manhattan. And he was going to the local masjid or mosque in Jersey City. He attended the mosque where Sheikh Abdul-Rahman, the blind sheikh from Egypt, was the sheikh.
That's right, Abdul-Rahman, yes.
Yes. And so anyway, that case, Muhammad was assigned to the Federal Defender Office in Manhattan, which is downtown Manhattan. And the Federal Defender Office in Manhattan had 3 investigators, but they were Latino and Hispanic. And so because of the cultural differences, the investigators were not able to get anyone to cooperate with them when they went to the community that Muhammad was from, because they didn't trust him. And so several months was passing, and there was no progress in the case. So there was a journalist, a Muslim journalist, following the case that knows me. And he would check in with the director of the Federal Defender Office in New York often, trying to get a update on the progress in Muhammad's case. And he kept telling them, well, we're having these difficulties. No one would talk to us. And the journalist said, well, would it make a difference if you had a Muslim investigator? And so the director said, yeah, but I don't have one. He says, I know one. And so he gave him my name. That director in New York called my director in Atlanta. We had a conference, and they asked me if I would get involved in the case. And so during the interview process, I kept getting pelted with questions about, well, do you speak Arabic fluently, and would you be able to make contact? And I was like, it's not the Arabic speaking that is an issue in this case. I said, it's a Muslim Islamic issue, and it has to do with culture. Yeah. It has to do with nuances that only Muslims do. Their protocols. And I said, so you have to understand that in the Arab world, there are millions of Arabs that speak Arabic, and they're non-Muslims. Yeah. They're Christians or whatever. I said, so it's not just the language part of it, though I speak a little Arabic. It's the culture. I said, so if you bring me in on this case, for the first week, all I'm going to do is go to that mosque and pray with them. That's it. And I said, then after a week, I will introduce myself to the emir, the leader of the community, and the imam, and with their permission and their assistance, start talking to other folks in the community so we can help Muhammad. Wow. I said, so if you're willing to do that, I'll come in on the case. And of course, they agreed. And so basically, they dispatched me to New York, and I worked in New York for 2 months on that case.
Wow.
And there were just thousands of documents involved. But the short of the case is when the FBI formulates a case against you, they're really thorough. But they didn't need a lot of assistance because Muhammad helped them out a lot, being that he never would have got apprehended because the mastermind, the day of the bombing, he was on the first flight out back to Pakistan.
Ramzi Yusuf, yeah?
And Ramzi Yusuf, yeah. Yes, he was gone. He was the day of, he was gone. And it took them years to
get him back.
I think they eventually apprehended
That's right.
him, yes. But Muhammad Salama, he went right back to Jersey City, and he was in his neighborhood, just whatever. So Muhammad goes back to the truck rental place where he had rented the truck a few days after the bombing, and he went back there and insisted that they return the deposit to him that he has to. You rent a vehicle, you have to put a deposit up, assuring that you won't damage or you'll bring the vehicle back. He goes back to this rental facility demanding the refund of his deposit. And he's quite adamant and emotional about it. And the clerk is like, okay, you want a refund, but where's my truck? And Muhammad is like, oh, it was stolen. He was like, okay, so if it's stolen, where's your police report? Did you report it? And he was like, no, I don't have a police report. He said, well, sir, I'll be happy to give you your refund, but I need a police report.
Or my truck back.
So Muhammad leaves. And when that truck exploded, I mean, one of the few things that survived on that vehicle was the vehicle identification tag that's attached to the engine. And the FBI had the VIN. On that vehicle. That's, and so then they were able to, days later, identify that, the rental place that it came from. But that rental clerk himself, after having that exchange with Muhammad, became, it's like he started putting things together. It was like, I wonder if that was my truck that was involved in that bombing. So he calls the FBI. The FBI, they tell him, call Muhammad back and tell him to come and get his deposit. And incredibly stupid, he goes back to get his deposit.
$500.
It's crazy. It was crazy. And so, but I worked on that case for 2 months, and I was embedded in New York, but it was so interesting because at that time that I was working on it, I was staying in Uptown, like 192nd in Dyckman, and so I would take the train into Manhattan every morning. And it was just so interesting taking the train in and seeing people with newspapers reading about that case every day.
Yeah,
nothing is more rewarding or exhilarating in this type of work to work on a major case like that. And you see people consuming it. And it's like, wow, it shows you the magnitude of what you're actually doing. Yes.
Before we go any further, let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a leading e-commerce management agency helping businesses succeed online. So whether it's looking for new products, supplier sourcing, account creation, creating listings, keyword research, image editing, video creation, or managing your PPC campaigns and advertising, WLC can provide a complete A to Z package that is tailored around your specific needs. So whether you're new at the e-commerce game or an established business wanting to take your sales to the next level, get in touch. WLC is here to help and support you every step of the way. Now, for transparency, let me also explain my own relationship with WLC. I'm actually the founder and the managing director of this fantastic company. So that means that I'm actually placed in a unique position where I can offer you a brilliant deal today. So if you are interested in e-commerce and you feel that you may benefit from some help in managing your account, then get in touch and we can offer you 1 month management with 0 fees. So you'll be getting 30 days of expert work for absolutely no cost to you at all. Simply, when you speak with someone, just quote Kianistan and I will personally make sure that you're well looked after. The number to dial is 0044 203 818 5666. Again, that's 0044 203 818 5666. You can also reach us at that number using WhatsApp, or you can reach us at www.worldwidelistings.co.uk. That's all one word, www.worldwidelistings.co.uk. Thank you, and let's get back to the podcast.
That case was really important because I think that was in some ways a prelude to September 11th, wasn't it? Because Ramzi Yusuf's uncle was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or someone from Pakistan who was then involved in September 11th.
I'm telling you, it was so, in the government, what it did was it shined an entire light on the United States intelligence community of how deficient they were in sharing information. And it alerted them to the extent where they put everyone under the spotlight nationally. And they started to cooperating and communicating with one another just on a whole different level. And in that case, the thing that was so surprising to me in that case was when I read the indictment read like a novel. But there are other things in the indictment was every Muslim imam or leader in the United States at that time was listed as an unindicted co-conspirator. Oh, wow. I mean, I was like, and in order to do that, you have to be able to justify attaching them to the case. So you have to have a narrative. Yes. And just reading it, I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever read.
Wow.
You've got to be kidding me. And so, I'm surprised they didn't include Yusuf. What is your countryman's name? I forget.
Yusuf Islam. I think he was having problems later on entering America, like after September 11th. Yeah,
exactly. But even leading up to that, after the World Trade Center, was shortly after that he started getting a lot of issues too. Even before
I remember that. Yeah,
and it was because of that. The first World Trade Center, like I said, they didn't list him as an unindicted co-conspirator, but his name was listed.
Wow.
You know, I mean, they had reference to him because they had reference to him, other people having a fellowship or, with him. And it was
So
crazy.
was it a very difficult time for Muslims, a bit like after September 11th in America?
No, not so much.
Okay.
No, not so much, because I think that because there wasn't much damage, and I think there were a couple of people that died because of smoke inhalation, or there were like some janitors or maintenance people that were in the immediate area. But because it didn't do as much damage, it kind of was a story, and then it kind of just fizzled out. And so it was more of a thing in New York, New Jersey thing than it was for the rest of the country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, brother,
but real quickly, ultimately, we went to trial, and of course he was convicted, and I believe he was sentenced to like 230 something years or something of that nature. Yes.
So he's still alive? He's still in prison now?
You know what? I would imagine, but I think he got sentenced to the Supermax facility that's in Colorado, which is literally underground.
Oh, wow.
And so was, and as a result of that case, they were able to use information out of that case, and they eventually indicted Sheikh Abdul-Rahman, and he was in prison.
Oh, wow.
And then he was in, and I think he passed away some years ago, but he was in prison in that Supermax facility in Colorado.
Huh. So also tell me, apart from the work that you're doing currently, you also have your own private investigation firm. Is that something you're involved in actively, or?
No, this was before. I mean, so before I took this position, this is a full-time position that I'm working now. So my private investigations work, this was previous before I took this particular assignment. So the past 5 years, I have not engaged in the private, but I still, of course, maintain relationships with most of my clients. When I had my private detective firm in Atlanta, most of my clients were in the entertainment industry, the music industry, and sports celebrities.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. So tell me about like your involvement with ISNA, Islamic Society for North America, how you got connected with them, and what was your work there?
Yeah, very interesting how that came about. I became an employee or a contractor to ISNA back in 1980. When was it? I think it was 1989. I was living in Kansas City, Missouri at that point, and I've always been a member of ISNA, but I was a member of ISNA initially through the MSA, the Muslim Student Association. So when I was in the university, in the Muslim Student Association, they have chapters at most of the larger universities and colleges in the United States to accommodate and to support Muslim students. And so when I was at Central Missouri State, it's now the University of Central Missouri, I was a member of MSA. And so when I graduated from the university and got into my professional works, of course, I maintained a relationship with MSA and ISNA. And so in '89, the incoming president of ISNA, Sheikh Ahmed Zaki Hamid, who was a graduate of Al-Azhar, and he has authored many books. I think he even authored a translation of Quran. Okay. So he was just a brilliant leader. He's the Egyptian brother. He came to Kansas City and gave a lecture. And after his lecture, he wanted to have a private audience with the African-American brothers that were in attendance. Because the majority of the membership of ISNA are primarily from the immigrant Muslim community. Not so much the indigenous Muslims, indigenous American Muslims. And so we were a minority at this particular meeting, and he wanted to have a private, meeting with us, which is about 5 of us. And during the course of that meeting, he was very curious about me. At that time, I was a former deputy sheriff, law enforcement, but I was also working as a state investigator for the state of Missouri. I was working for the Missouri Capital Defender's Office at that time, which is an agency that we represented people that were facing the death penalty.
Oh, wow.
That's the when I came into criminal defense work, that's what I started. Wow. I started my career representing people that are facing the death penalty. And so he was so taken with what I was doing and my position. He asked me, he said, at ISNA, the incoming president, there are a lot of issues that we have going on. And he said, and I can't figure out what's going on. I don't know if there's infiltration. There's a lot of things going on, and we could use you. And so he brought me in to be the director of security for ISNA. And one of the first things that he had me do was to go to their world headquarters, which was in Plainfield, Indiana, which is a suburb of Indianapolis, Indiana. And then just to basically observe the day-to-day operations of the organization. Wow. And I was observing all kind of weird and crazy things going on in that building. And then, I was responsible for the safety and security of all of our conventions and conferences.
Wow.
And I had that relationship with ISNA. I had that position, director of security of ISNA, for 12 years.
Wow. Because to me, it just strikes me as odd that an institution like ISNA, a religious institution, would need a security team, but would also be concerned about infiltration. And so it seems like quite a stressful. Was that the time we were in, or is it still like that now?
It's always that time. I mean, wow. we're talking about a time where they had this one journalist, this American journalist. His career was made on all these exposés he did about American Muslims, but he only highlighted the immigrant American Muslim community and not the African American community, because it's more interesting to try to package Muslims as, pretty much in America. When you ask the average person in America about Muslims, and this was true when I became a Muslim, and it's even true today. When you ask an average American an opinion of a Muslim, two pictures pop in their head. It's either a picture of a person with a jalabiya and a kufiya, a turban, and an AK-47, or it's a picture of Louis Farrakhan with a bow tie.
Yeah.
And, so those are the two pictures that pops in their mind. So when I come in contact with just the common people, this is what I'm dealing with. They want to know, well, what kind of Muslim are you? I said, well, if you understand the definition of Muslim, I'm that. I'm one who submits himself to Allah. This is literally what a Muslim is under the culture or under the guidance of Islam from the Quran. This is what Muslims are. But you have to, for me as an African American, as a Black Muslim in America, when I introduce people, I have to do a disclaimer.
Yeah, exactly.
And that disclaimer starts with, I am not currently or have I ever been a member of the Nation of Islam. and then I have to go into greater detail to explain to them. And this is in fact my opinion, and is supported by the evidence, particularly with our dear brother Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. Yeah. He exposed what that group was, and they are nothing other than a Black nationalistic group, but they use Islam as a shield to cover their racist, radical, and nationalistic views. And the way that I get non-Muslims to understand that here in America, I tell them this: the Nation of Islam, they are to Muslims and to Islam what the Ku Klux Klan is to Christianity. And what Hitler is to Christianity. And so I said, so we know that that's outside the realms of what Jesus taught. I said, similarly, these people are outside the fold. I said, as a matter of fact, it's even considered heresy in our faith, what they believe in. Yeah.
So at that time, Malcolm X, was he already converted to Orthodox Sunni Islam? Or did you ever get to meet Malcolm X?
No. Malcolm X. I was a boy when Malcolm X was assassinated. So I never met Malcolm X. I met Muhammad Ali.
Tell me about that, brother.
Who was Malcolm X is the one who brought Muhammad Ali into Islam. Muhammad Ali walked into a lecture that Malcolm X was doing, and I forgot what city he was in. And after hearing Malcolm X one time, Muhammad Ali converted to Islam, but he converted to the Nation of Islam. So you have to understand that what the Nation of Islam was projecting to black people at that time, it was palatable. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't difficult to digest that the white man was a devil and this, that, and the other, because
conditions.
Certainly they were doing devilish things. And so, but to package that to say this is what Islam teaches is a lie. Okay. But so this is what they were given to. So, Muhammad Ali met Malcolm, I believe in 1964. The latter part of 63, 64, just before he had the first fight against Sonny Liston. And so Muhammad was he loved Malcolm. And it was just him and Malcolm at that point. And Malcolm actually was like on his way out of the Nation of Islam at that time because of the statement that he had made about Kennedy being assassinated. And so Malcolm was traveling and he was exposed to Orthodox Islam and he wanted to make the exit. However, he was conflicted because he still had the loyalty and the allegiance to Elijah Muhammad, the leader. So, but anyway, him meeting Muhammad Ali, Muhammad became a practicing Muslim. And then of course, he later abandoned Malcolm because the Nation of Islam, they kind of basically isolated Malcolm from Muhammad. And then they just had direct communication with him, with Elijah Muhammad. And so Malcolm was out and Ali kind of turned his back on him. But I met Muhammad Ali the first time. I worked with Ali 4 different times in my capacity with working with ISNA. But I met Ali in 1988 in Denver, Colorado. I was living in Colorado at that time, 1987, 1988. And I was a deputy sheriff with the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Department at that time. And I was attending the masjid in Aurora, Colorado. So all the brothers knew what I did for a living, and they wanted me to consult with them about security matters. And then I had a group of guys that worked with me, and we did the traffic control on Fridays at the masjid for the believers coming to the masjid and such. So anyway, they were planning a weekend event where Ali was the guest speaker. And they realized that they didn't have anyone to receive Ali, and they didn't have a security detail. So they asked me if I would provide security for Muhammad. And I said, absolutely. Wow. So the Friday comes for Ali to. Did you want me to get into the story?
Please do.
Or okay. And so the Friday comes for Ali arrives. I go to the airport. We receive him, and we go straight to the masjid. So when we get to the masjid, before we get out of the limo, I said, so brother, this is the first time I ever met this man. So I was like, so brother, when we go into this mosque, there's about 1,300 Muslims in there. I said, and so after Jummah is over, let's sit towards the back so that way I can get you out of here. We can go to our next appointment. Yeah. And so I'm looking at, and he just looks at me. He's never acknowledged this or anything. So anyway, we go into the masjid, and the masjid is packed. So Ali starts moving people to the side, and he's making his way to the front row. He gets to the front row. He's seated, and the khatib, he's an Egyptian graduate from Al-Azhar. It even shocks him. He
recognized Muhammad Ali.
He recognizes Ali, and it throws him off his khutbah. So he continues. So Ali sits there, and I sit behind him. So we finished the salat. We do the salams. We finish the salat, and then everybody just converges on Ali. Everybody. He stands up, and people are hugging him and pulling on his clothes and grabbing him. And he was so accommodating. He hugged every brother that wanted a hug. He kissed every child that wanted to kiss. He took every picture, and every time I'm kind of pushing him and prodding him towards the exit of the masjid, And so we finally get to the front door of the masjid, and the doors open up. And I realize I don't even know where I need to take this brother. So I'm like, where are we going, champ? And so he's trying to tell me what's going on. And at that time, his disease, the Parkinson's, had just really started to take effect in him. And it wasn't as severe as it became, but it was kind of mild. And at that point, he still could talk, but he talked like at a whisper. And so he's telling me where we need to go, and I got a pen and a paper, and I'm trying to write this down. And he's like speaking to me in my ear. At that moment, there was a photographer from the Denver Post that took a picture.
Wow.
Of course, I knew nothing about it. And so anyway, we finish, and we're going to the limo. And just before I get into the limo, this reporter comes up and was like, "Who are you? What is your?" So I give him my card. Anyway, so Ali and I, we proceed. We go to the event downtown Denver, and then I'm taking him back to his hotel room. So we go back to the hotel room. He's like, "Brother, come on in. Let's talk for a while. Don't just leave."
Wow.
So I was like, "Wow, okay, sure." So I'm in there, and then we started talking, and he's asking me how I came to Islam. And I said, "Well, like you, I came to Islam after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X." His whole face changed. And then I told him that I was working with this lady in Nebraska who was trying to establish. Actually, I was a charter member of a group called the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation.
Wow, were you?
And this woman that was a non-Muslim African-American woman that was like a civil rights leader in Nebraska, she purchased this property in Nebraska, and it came to her attention that the properties that she purchased was the birth home of Malcolm X. And so she bought the surrounding properties, and then she started trying to build it up, and she started on her own volition to establish the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation. Amazing. And she started with the state of Nebraska, and she was able to get legislation passed where that birth site was established as a state national treasure for the state of Nebraska. And then the next move was to get it to have it to be a national monument, like the birthplace of Dr. King is in Atlanta. And so anyway, I was telling Muhammad about this. He knew nothing about it. He was like, "Give me her name, give me, her contact information." He said, "Is it too late to be a charter member?" I said, for you? Never.
Wow.
And so anyway, so we're talking, and the entire time that we're talking, he has a stack of brochures, and that he's autographing those brochures. And the brochure was entitled Why I Choose Islam. That was the name of that brochure. Why I Choose Islam. He was signing those brochures because at that time, the Parkinson's was, affecting him, and he didn't give autographs any longer. So what he would do, he would take a stack of those brochures and put them in his jacket pocket. And then when he was out during whatever activities, if someone asked for his autograph, he gave them this brochure. Why I Choose Islam with his autograph, right? Brilliant way of giving dawah. And so, it's not imposing or intrusive. It's just, hey, this is what my autograph is on.
Do you have one of them by any chance?
No, I never. I didn't.
At the time,
just because I had a history of being around so many celebrities, but I do have that picture.
Yeah.
That picture is an iconic picture. It's the greatest picture I have of any photographs of anyone, because this man was the most recognized face in the world.
Of course,
he could go to a remote village in Africa.
He could.
And they were
really
like,
could.
Muhammad Ali.
Yep.
He could go to Indonesia. He could go wherever. He could go to Russia, and he was.
I was told that in Pakistan we used to have like national holiday when he was boxing.
Wow, that's incredible. So I'm sitting there telling him, and I'm telling him about this foundation, the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation, and he's totally engaged, right? And it came over me. I was like, this is incredible. I'm sitting here with Muhammad Ali, the most recognized person on the planet, and this man wants me to give him this information. And we have this connection, tribal connection with this great man, Malcolm X, right? And so we're talking, and then I looked at the time. I was like, oh my God, look at the time, champ. I got to leave. Oh, by the way, when I was in his room with him, we prayed together. We made salat together, and that was just amazing, right? And so I said, oh, champ, let me go. I said, I'm keeping you up too late. I got to be back here in the morning to take you to breakfast. And so when I get to the door, I said, champ, I said, get some rest. I said, you've been signing those brochures the entire time we've been talking, right? And he tells me, he says, brother, I'm going to sign 25 more. And that's 25 more souls that would be invited to Islam. I was like, wow, it was incredible. It was incredible.
Amazing human.
So, and then thereafter that, of course, was spent the next day, and then we of activities, and he left. But then when I, during my tenure with ISNA, I was responsible for him for 3 other times. And when he would see me, his face would just light up. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. So it was amazing. And then he would always ask me, like the next time that I saw him, he was like, have you heard from, were you aware of the donation I made, and how things going with the foundation, right? It was credible. So I had this relationship with Muhammad at that time. And one of the charter members, organizers of that organization, was Attila Shabazz, Malcolm's oldest daughter. Yeah. So I used to have communication with her a lot as well. So it was just, for me, it was just an amazing chapter in my life.
I heard he developed a really good relationship with Malcolm's older daughter, didn't he? I don't know if you know about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Malcolm's oldest daughter and Dr. King's oldest daughter, they created a sisterhood that endured until, I think, the older Dr. King's daughter, she died. But Attila she was just, I mean, and of all the children, she looks exactly like her dad. It is so eerie. She looks exactly like her dad, Malcolm. Wow.
Amazing times and amazing personalities. And you're so lucky to have met these people who are going to be our part of history. And I don't think there's anyone like them now.
No, never. I mean, and that's the amazing part, the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. And when you look back, what's so incredible to me is when you read people's biographies and you see the humble beginnings that they had no idea what Allah had destined for them. Yeah. They were just living their lives and trying to survive, but you can see the talent that those individuals had and how it impacted the world. My message to everyone, particularly the youth, we all have gifts, and it is a blessing when you recognize what your gift is, and then you enhance it. You're focused on it, and you can see the benefit in it.
It's very true. So I really believe that Muhammad Ali, whatever he was so much more than just a sportsman, and whatever he did, he would have excelled in it. I think he was saying once that if I was a bin man, I would be the fastest bin man in town.
Yeah.
He wasn't.
Yeah. I used to love some of his poetry and just some of his.
It's very quick.
Some of his bragdacious, just bragging about things. He once said, he was telling this reporter, he was like, they were like, how fast are you? How quick are you, Muhammad? He said, I'm so fast that I could turn the light switch off and be in bed before the room gets dark. Oh, and I met a flight attendant once in Atlanta. This is so funny. I met this flight attendant in Atlanta, and she was explaining to me this encounter that she had with Ali on a flight. He was flying first class. And so they're taxiing, and she noticed that Muhammad didn't have his seatbelt on. And she said, Mr. Ali, we're taxiing, and you must buckle your seatbelt. You know, you must secure your seatbelt. She said, he turns to her and says, sweetie, Superman doesn't need any seatbelt. And she leaned over and she said, Muhammad, Superman doesn't need an airplane. Now buckle your seatbelt.
Oh, wow. She told him.
Yes, that was incredible.
Brother.
But he was like that. His personality, it was just amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Before we started that, I promised myself I'm going to hopefully contain everything within an hour. We smashed that time.
Yes.
It's gone past an hour and a half, I think. But if you still have time, I would love to hear about your experiences and time spent with Hakeem Olajuwon.
Hakeem Olajuwon, yes. Yeah, so Hakeem is very interesting. It's an interesting story how I even met Hakeem Olajuwon. So at the time, of course, I'm working with ISNA. It was 1992. And I was attending an economic conference in Houston. So ISNA would have all these different conferences. But so the economic conference, it was by invitation only, and they had the Amir of the Islamic banking mechanism in attendance. They had the leader of the Islamic educational institution in attendance. And they had invited Sheikh Hassan Torabi, the Speaker of the Parliament from Sudan. Nice. He was supposed to come. And he had arrived in the U.S., but he was in D.C., and he had meetings with certain Congress and senators and congressional people, and he got detained. Not government, they didn't want to let him leave. They wanted to, for him to stay. So he was supposed to come to the conference in Houston, and they had the presidential suite of the Hyatt Hotel reserved for him, which was at the top floor of this very exclusive hotel in Houston, Texas. And there were only 2 rooms on that floor. One of the suites, and they were both presidential suites, but one of the suites was occupied or maintained by then President Bush.
Oh, wow.
So it was President Bush, it was his residence that he maintained so that he could maintain his residency in Texas, so that he could vote in Texas. And the other suite was just a presidential suite that anyone could reserve. So ISNA had reserved that suite for Sheikh Hassan. And so when Sheikh Hassan didn't show up, myself and my assistant, we were occupying that presidential suite. So anyway, Hakeem appears, he shows up and for this luncheon that we were having. And we're having this luncheon, and during the luncheon, there was a journalist there that was a Palestinian journalist. And he was asking Hakeem all these questions. It was a little too personal. He was asking him, so brother, do you know brother Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? Hakeem was like, of course I know him. That's my brother. He said, I trained with him. And so then he asked him, he said, so Hakeem, is he a good Muslim? So I interjected. I was like, whoa. What are you talking about? That's not an appropriate question to ask him. Why would you ask him that? I said, what answer could he give you? I said, so, I got really heated. Now, the backstory behind that was I knew this guy because he attended a lot of the ISNA activities, and he was very controversial like that. And anything that you say to him, he's going to print it. So Hakeem didn't know he was a journalist.
Yeah.
So Hakeem was like, no, brother, I'm not going to, that's not, like the brother said, that's not appropriate for me. He's our brother, right? And so then Hakeem, he stretches his arm out. He says, calm down, brother. You calm down. I said, no. I said, you don't know this guy. I know this guy. Anyway, the editor for Horizon magazine was present also. And so after the luncheon, the editor of Horizon, he wanted to interview Hakeem. So Hakeem was like, "Oh yeah, of course. I'll do the interview." And he said, "Where are we going to go? Where can we go private?" I said, "Oh, let's go to my room. I got a room. Let's go to my room." And so we get on the elevator. Me, my assistant, Hakeem Olajuwon, Tajuddin Olajuwon, his brother, and then the editor of Horizon. So we're going up in the elevator. I'm standing next to Hakeem, and he puts his hand on my shoulder. And he's like tall. I mean, he's 7 foot tall. I'm 6'2". So he's like, "Brother, you have to calm down. Why did you get so angry?" And I had to explain to him, this guy he's a journalist, and everything that you were telling him, he's going to print it. He said he didn't enter. I said, that's not what he does. He's not going to introduce himself. I said, that's why I was angry. And so then he thanked me for intervening, right? So then when we get to the suite, so I learned later from Tajuddin as a backstory. So we get to the presidential suite, and they go to another section of the suite, and they do the interview. And so that's when I first met Hakeem. But he was so taken by me that we stayed in touch. He gave me his number, and every time he would come to Atlanta, at that time I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. When he would come to Atlanta, he would invite me to the hotel. We would have dinner the day before the game. Then, of course, he gave me passes for the game. And then that just evolved, and I would come to Houston and actually go stay at his home and visit him and his family. Amazing. And so, but I became more friends with his brother, Tajuddin. And so we did many things together. I've traveled with Hakeem internationally because Hakeem was living off season in Amman, Jordan. Yeah. He actually had a home there. He lived in this area called Jerish, and he literally bought a mountain. He purchased a mountain, and he built his house on the top of the mountain. And then as you descend down from the mountain, he built a masjid there for the local people. Yeah,
he still lives partly in Jordan, no? Or is he?
No, he lives partly now in the UK. Oh, he's educating and raising his children in the UK, and then the other time he stays in Texas. Okay. So I don't think that he goes to Jordan that much any longer.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but one thing about working with Hakeem, I've traveled, I've done so many different things with Hakeem, and the interesting thing about him was he was so adherent to the Quran, to the book and the Sunnah. To the extent that when they won their first NBA championship, world championship in 1994, 94, and then they had the championship ring ceremony where they give the players their ring. And so they're at the arena, and they're like, "Oh, Hakeem Olajuwon, our superstar, here's your ring." And they give him a box of his championship ring. Yeah. He opens up the ring, he looks at it, he closes it, he gives it back to the owner. And so the owner was like, what? He said, I can't wear it. He was like, "What do you mean? This is your championship ring. No franchise in Houston history has won a championship. This is your ring." He says, "Well, I appreciate it, but I can't wear it." He said, "I'm a Muslim, and Muslim men, we can't wear gold."
That's amazing. That he didn't even hesitate for a second. He just returned it.
Didn't hesitate, not for 1 second. A $15,000 ring, he gives it back to her. So that put the owner in a he's perplexed now. What do we do? So a couple of months later, they call Hakeem to his office. Then he gives him another box. He says, "This is your championship ring." Again. So Hakeem opens the box, and it's platinum. It's pure platinum. And so Hakeem said, "What is this, white gold?" He said, "No, it's platinum." He said, so now where it was 15,000, now it's 20,000. Yeah. So, and just, when we adhere to our faith, we don't know the impact that it has because everyone's watching us. And little things like that, which he had no intention on trying to give dawah, any of that. He was just practicing his faith. And so when you do that, we don't know what rewards Allah has for us on the backside of it.
That's very true. And also when you sacrifice something for the sake of Allah Ta'ala, Allah Ta'ala rewards you. And like you said, in that case, instantly he got a better ring. Not
Absolutely. Oh, and to that extent, also what happened was after they made that platinum ring for Hakeem and his teammates, now they're seeing they got gold
they don't
rings.
like their rings
now
anymore.
They see Hakeem. They don't like. They're like, how'd you get a platinum ring? Right. So the next year they repeated as champions. So they're back-to-back champions. Wow. And so now the owner, he makes everyone's ring platinum. and to this That's day, funny. In the United States, most of the franchise, particularly the NFL, the National Football League, and the NBA, when you get a ring, it's platinum now. Because of Hakeem Olajuwon, and it was totally unintentional.
Amazing. Tell us the story you told me about the statue they wanted to build for.
Oh, okay. Yes, very interesting. So when Hakeem retired from the NBA, a couple of years after his retirement, and during the time that they were going to induct him into the Basketball Hall of Fame, which is another story. So when they called him about inducting him into the Basketball Hall of Fame, what they do is in these Hall of Fames, different sports in the U.S., they make a statue, a bust of your head. And so Hakeem told them, no. You can't do that. You can't make a bust of me. So they just have a picture of him in the Hall of Fame. They don't have a bust. But now the owner of the team said, "Listen, you are the greatest athlete for the city of Houston." They said, as a matter of fact, and this is an interesting connection they made. They said in Chicago, Michael Jordan has a statue of him in front of the arena, and he said, and you are to us. As important to us as Michael Jordan to Chicago, so we want to honor you by making a statue of you. And so Hakeem said, you can't do that. No. And he said, what? No, this is in honor of you. It's not, we're trying to honor you. He's like, no, please don't do that. Don't make a statue of me. And they were like, why not? He said, well, I'm Muslim. We don't believe in making images and statues and such. So I don't give you my permission to do that. And so, they left the conversation. Once again, he puts this owner, he's perplexed. What do we do? And so then they consulted on it and they called Hakeem back and they said, how about we make a statue of your jersey? Would that work? And Hakeem was like, okay. Sounds kind of crazy to me, but okay. So anyway, they commissioned a artist to make a statue of Hakeem's jersey number 34, and they had the unveiling ceremony. Now the public has no idea what's under this curtain, and they got all these people of Houston standing around, and Tajuddin, Hakeem's brother, is standing there with this diehard Houston fan, and when they unveil it, the entire audience gasp. They're like, oh, like, where's the rest of it? And so the guy standing next to Tajuddin, he was like, where's the rest of the statue? And so Tajuddin said, that's it. Wow. He was like, why? He said, we don't believe in statues. He said, so the guy got really quiet. And then he said to Tajuddin, what did the statue do to you guys?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it is going to make people think about why is this?
Absolutely. And similarly, Ali had the same effect on American culture. In the United States, they have this, everyone wants to go to LA, Hollywood, California. And there they have the celebrity Walk of Fame, the star, where you get the star with your name on it, and they put it on the sidewalk. And when people go there, they take pictures. They kneel down and take a picture of Michael Jackson and Al Pacino, whatever, whoever your greatest star is. So Ali, they called him and they told him, congratulations. We're going to commission your star on the Walk of Fame. And they make this long presentation. And after they finish, he tells them, you can't do that. Don't do that. They were like, what? This is your star on the Walk of Fame. And he was like, He says, you cannot take the name Muhammad Ali and put it on the ground for people to walk on. He said, that's not my name. I'm named after Muhammad the Prophet and Ali, his cousin. He said, so you cannot. These are revered names in our faith, and it's disrespectful to have people walking on that name. So you can't do it. You don't have my permission. So they called him back and they compromised. They said, how about we put it on the building at that Chinese restaurant? How about if we put it on the building? And he said, sure, you can do that. His star is the only star on the Walk of Fame that's actually on the building. And so there again, when people see this, they have questions, and the answers to the questions is dawah.
It's amazing. It's like you were saying, like it's amazing role models for us. It's a lesson for us.
Absolutely.
How to engage with people and how not to be embarrassed about our belief, but be confident and be proud.
Exactly. And then it speaks volumes to the commitment to the deen that those men had. Because had they acquiesced, they would have had a statue. He would have wore a gold ring. He would have had the Walk of Fame on the ground. And so, and what other than Allahu Akbar, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put that yaqeen in them, that they were not going to do it. Whatever the cost, we're not going to do this. And so I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establishes that in all of the believers.
Ameen.
That we can have the discipline and the wherewithal to be the best adherents of our faith as we can be.
Ameen. Thank you so much, brother. I took more time than I was planning, and I really hope that I haven't ruined your day. The rest of your day, have a very lovely day. And as I already said to you, inshallah, when you do visit the UK, my doors are open. You'll be our guest. I look forward to that day.
Absolutely. The most important thing you have to do is feed me and let's pray together.
Definitely. Both of those things will happen, inshallah. I look forward to it.
All right, brother.
It'll be my pleasure and an honor for me.
And I wish to extend to everyone in the listening audience, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you. We can end there.